This is going to be the most insane story you've ever heard about a hi-fi company, okay? A samurai's son repairs an organ, hand carries it over 100 miles to a music college to see if it's any good. It sounds like the setup to a joke, but it's not. This story has everything. Fire bombings, motorcycles, stereo receivers, virtual singers, an abandoned Buddhist temple? Yeah, but most importantly, this story has destiny. Fate. It's not just surprising, this thing is flat out unbelievable. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the insane story of Yamaha. So, Torakuzu Yamaha, born in 1851, which is now Kanan City. I'm not going to get any of these pronunciations right, so get used to it. Now, Japan in the 1860s looked a lot different than the US in the 1860s. We had railroads, the gold rush, Civil War. They were basically on pause for 250 years. Japan was basically cut off from the rest of the world and under complete military rule. And being a samurai, well, not as glamorous as the movies. Now, there was still security for the lord that they worked for, but they were record keepers. They were still training every day, but they were also teaching the kids. And Yamaha's dad was also an astronomer, which he had to do with handmade tools. Now, the life of a samurai's son is pretty regimented, disciplined, exacting, precise. And it kind of made sense that Yamaha went on to study watchmaking in Nagasaki and medical devices in Osaka, and later moved to what is now Hamamatsu. Things were pretty bad and he couldn't get a job except pulling the rickshaw for a hospital director. But that random rickshaw not only would change his life, but it would change the world. So this is where the whole rickshaw gig pays off. He was pulling around a guy named Fukushima, and they became friends. So Yamaha was talking about all the things he did with watchmaking, with the medical devices, and Fukushima knew of a school that needed an organ repaired. He figured, listen, if he can build watches, he can repair an organ. Well, Yamaha did repair it, and he got kind of obsessed with it, to the point where he's like, I want to make my own. So he builds one, and it was kind of terrible. But he didn't know it was terrible. So what did he do? He strapped it to his back and took it 150 miles to Tokyo by foot. He was very proud of it, goes to a music school, shows it to the professors, and in their polite way, they said it was badly conceived. The problem? It was engineered well, but it had no soul. However, they did see the potential, and because Yamaha was pretty much an engineer, they gave him a gift that would later change his life. A 1-month crash course in music theory. And he takes it, goes back home, builds another organ, and this time it was really good. And a whole bunch of people wanted to buy his organ. So Torakuzu founds a company. It's called Nippon Gakki. Rolls right off the tongue. They started cranking out reed organs, harmonicas, and even pianos. Until then, every organ that was in Japan had to be imported. Well, now they didn't. They were cheaper, faster, and sounded just as good. Oh, and guess where he was building them? An abandoned Buddhist temple. Why? Well, because at the time, Japanese government decided there should be only the good kind of Buddhists. The other ones, they're not welcome anymore. So out with religion, in with the organ. And the whole Buddhist development was because Japan decided, okay, we need to get modern with the rest of the world. But just as the company was hitting their stride, something else happened. World War I was happening. Almost all of the organs that were coming into Japan were coming from Europe. Well, their organ supply chain was cut off, so they got a huge boost in sales. Basically, they went from scrappy Japanese instrument manufacturers startup in a abandoned Buddhist temple to being, well, the largest instrument manufacturer in Japan. And the founder, well, he passed away. But Nippon Gakki, later to become Yamaha, was firing on all cylinders. Remember that one later too. And because Nippon Gakki was doing so well, it got the Japanese government's attention. And the Japanese government said, hey, you're going to become part of the war machine. And things shifted a little bit for Nippon Gakki. By the 1930s, Japan was gearing up for war. The men were forced into military service. The companies were forced into military supply. Nippon Gakki was already good at woodworking and their machining skills were getting better. So they were redirected from making reed organs to airplane propellers. So now the company that started with organs is making propellers and bugles, and that kind of paints a big old red bullseye on Hamamatsu, literally. Hamamatsu wasn't just the home of Nippon Gakki, later to become Yamaha, it was also an industrial hub tied to the railway. And in 1945, the US napalmed it. So just like that, Japanese biggest instrument maker was leveled, as well as a bunch of other industries in Japan at the time. But the question was, how do they continue when they've basically lost everything? I think we all know how things turned out at the end of World War II. The US was occupying Japan, and any industry or manufacturing in Japan had to get US permission to make, well, anything. So Yamaha started making pianos and harmonicas. And in 1954, they even opened up a music school. But what's interesting is when they switched to making stuff for the military, they picked up some skills, better machining. And guess what they made in 1955? A motorcycle. It was the YA1, the Red Dragonfly. Why a motorcycle? Easy. They needed to diversify. And it just so happened there's some German designs lying around that were fairly easy to copy. It was an instant success, and that proved that Yamaha could do more than just musical instruments. And they took some of that knowledge and parlayed that into the Electone, which was Yamaha's first electronic instrument. They also opened up facilities in Mexico in 1961 and the US in 1962. Yamaha started making everything. They said, hey, we can make propellers out of wood. Why not acoustic guitars? And we made that organ that plugs into the wall. Let's keep doing that. So they made an electric bass. I figured we're making bugles. Why not trumpets? Drums can't possibly be that complicated. Let's do woodwinds too. Let's just do a whole band. And in 1967, well, they started making speakers. In 1974, the iconic NS1000 monitors were released. They had beryllium drivers. And in 1976, they made a synthesizer, the CS80. It got to the point that if it was making sound, Yamaha probably made it. And in 1987, they celebrated their 100-year anniversary. They changed the name from Nippon Gakki to Yamaha. Keep in mind, this company had been operating for a century already, and the Yamaha name became synonymous with quality, with incredible engineering, and with a little bit of soul. In the late 60s, Yamaha made the NS1000, which was kind of their first step into hi-fi. The 70s and 80s, well, they made receivers. I have one right back there. Their reputation was reliability and natural neutral sound. They also have a variable loudness control, which is pretty cool. In the 90s, Yamaha became the name in AV receivers. And they were also at the front end of streaming amplifiers. They make everything from affordable soundbars, affordable hi-fi, to beautiful vintage-inspired integrated amplifiers and power amplifiers. They're everywhere doing everything. However, the market was gonna shift. In the late 80s, 90s, leading up all the way to the year 2000, Yamaha was undisputedly the largest instrument manufacturer in the world, as well as making motorcycles, hi-fi gear, amongst other things. However, around the year 2000, they ended up losing a lot of money, and the company had to restructure. They brought in a new CEO, and they had to innovate. Again, this time with Vocaloid. Apparently, it was a software where you could create a singer, a fake one. And by 2013, Sega and Krypton was using this technology to have live concerts with cartoons that were singing using the Yamaha technology. For the uninitiated, Vocaloid started out as basically a synth tool. And now anybody can download it. There's over 100 voices that you can use. Or just use Miku, She was in Toyota Corolla ads. Meanwhile, Yamaha keeps expanding. They acquire Boyzendorfer in 2008, the world's largest piano maker. Yamaha was innovative, and the whole world was recognizing it. Even Reuters put them on a list of innovative companies. So let's just think about this for a second. A samurai's son ends up pulling a rickshaw. Because of that, he gets asked to repair an organ. Because of that, he made an organ. Then he learns music. Then he made a better organ. Then he came back and made organs and pianos in an abandoned Buddhist temple. The company gets taken over by the military and forced into making weapons of war. And somehow they spin that into making motorcycles and different types of instruments. Stereo receivers, studio monitors, which are still very popular today. And at this point, every symphony performance that you attend, someone's probably using a Yamaha instrument. You may be listening to a symphony with Yamaha instruments that was mastered with Yamaha studio monitors through your Yamaha receiver. So there's a high chance that Yamaha either was used directly in the music performance or somehow through Yamaha gear. You can call it innovation, you can call it reinvention, but honestly, this feels a lot like fate. From rice page samurai roots, from firebombs, motorcycles, speakers, to holographic singers, the Yamaha story isn't just crazy. It's proof that destiny doesn't always just play out in history books. It plays out in music. I love making this video. It makes me want to go out and buy a Yamaha amplifier. If you like this one, you'll probably like the video I just did on Klapsch. Put that right up here. I'll put maybe a cassette video up over here. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen. Maybe go buy this wallet that reminds you to binge listen. Link in the description to the store where you can buy this and some other stuff. If you learned something new, give this a thumbs up, subscribe, maybe send this to a friend. Thank you so much for watching.